Zero Dark 30. The world's most critical maritime choke point is a powder keg waiting for a spark. And in the last 12 hours, a third player has just thrown a lit match into the room. We have breaking, multi-source confirmed intelligence that has fundamentally and irrevocably altered the US-Iran conflict. What began as a series of anomalous radar returns and ghost signals is now an undeniable strategic reality. A People's Liberation Army Navy carrier strike group has entered the Strait of Hormuz. For days, the tension has been ratcheting, a high-frequency scream just below the level of human hearing. US and Iranian forces have been locked in a state of heightened alert, a hair-trigger standoff with global implications. Every ship movement, every sortie flown, is scrutinized by intelligence agencies from Langley to Tehran. But no one, not CENTCOM, not Mossad, not MI6, predicted this. The first indications came from orbiting assets. Synthetic aperture radar, capable of piercing cloud cover in the darkness of night, painted a picture that analysts initially dismissed as a sophisticated spoofing operation. A massive surface naval contact, far larger than any known Iranian flotilla, was vectoring south through the Gulf of Oman, making a direct course for Hormuz. It was moving with a discipline and speed characteristic of only a handful of world powers. Simultaneously, maritime tracking services began picking up a cluster of encrypted AIS transponders. They weren't broadcasting standard identification codes, but their telemetry speed, course, and formation integrity screamed military precision. These weren't rogue commercial vessels. This was a wolf pack. The initial assessment pointed towards a possible Russian naval exercise, but the vessel signatures didn't match. The scale was all wrong. The lead signature was enormous, displacing close to 80,000 tons. Then came the visual confirmation from a passing commercial satellite. The flagship was unmistakable. The flat-top deck, the advanced island superstructure, the 3 electromagnetic catapults. This was the PLAN's newest and most formidable warship, the Type 003 carrier, the Fujian. This isn't just an aircraft carrier. It's a statement. Unlike its ski-jump predecessors, the Fujian possesses a catapult-assisted takeoff but arrested recovery, or CATOBAR, system. This allows it to launch heavier, more capable aircraft like the J-35 stealth fighter and the KJ-600 airborne early warning craft, putting it in a class previously occupied only by the United States and France. And it wasn't alone. Satellite intelligence and electronic signal intercepts confirmed its escorts. A full carrier strike group, 2 Type 055 cruisers. Vessels so large and heavily armed the Pentagon classifies them as cruisers, not destroyers. Each is packed with 112 vertical launch system cells, capable of firing a devastating mix of anti-air, anti-ship, and land attack cruise missiles. They wwere flanked by 4 Type 052D destroyers, the workhorses of the PLN, and supported by a Type 901 fast combat support ship, a floating logistics base capable of refueling and rearming the entire group at sea. This wasn't a port visit. This wasn't a simple freedom of navigation exercise far out in the Indian Ocean. This was a deliberate, calculated insertion of a massive concentration of naval power into the most volatile, congested, and strategically vital waterway on the planet. For hours, Washington was silent. The Pentagon refused to comment on matters of intelligence. But the silence itself was a confirmation. They were caught completely off guard. Then, precisely at 0400 Zulu time, the Fujian broke radio silence. It broadcasted an open message, in English and Mandarin, to all maritime traffic in the region. The message was chillingly simple, and it has set the world on a knife's edge. The declaration from the bridge of the Fujian was not a threat. It was an edict. The message, repeated every 30 minutes, declared the establishment of a neutrality patrol zone. The stated objective, according to the follow-up statement from Beijing's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, was to safeguard the uninhibited flow of international commerce and to de-escalate rising military tensions. They claim they are there to prevent a war. But in geopolitics, neutrality is never neutral. It's a power play disguised as peacekeeping. By planting their flag directly between the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet and Iran's formidable coastal defenses, Beijing has not created a vacuum. It has created a buffer, a shield. But a shield for whom? This neutrality patrol effectively means that any military action by either the United States or Iran must now account for a Chinese carrier strike group in the line of fire. A misfired Iranian missile, or an American Tomahawk that strays off course, could now inadvertently strike a Chinese warship, triggering an international incident of unimaginable proportions. The reaction from Washington has been one of controlled fury. A Pentagon spokesperson stated, "We recognize the right of all nations to sail in international waters, but we are monitoring the situation closely and will continue to ensure freedom of navigation for all." Read between the lines. This is a direct challenge, and we are not backing down. Privately, sources within the Department of Defense are describing the move as recklessly destabilizing and a strategic ambush. Tehran's response has been markedly different. An Iranian foreign ministry spokesman welcomed what he called the efforts of friendly nations to promote peace and stability in the Persian Gulf. This is a carefully crafted endorsement. For Iran, the Chinese presence is a godsend. It acts as a de facto tripwire. The United States can no longer consider a preemptive strike on Iranian nuclear facilities or naval bases without weighing the risk of direct kinetic engagement with the People's Liberation Army Navy. This fundamentally rewrites the rules of engagement. The U.S. Navy's doctrine in the Gulf has always relied on overwhelming technological superiority and freedom of maneuver. Now that maneuver space is critically constrained. The Strait of Hormuz is, at its narrowest point, only 21 nautical miles wide. There is no room for error. A U.S. carrier strike group cannot operate effectively with a peer competitor's CSG sitting on its flank, its sensors watching every move, its weapon systems potentially ready to fire. Every tactical calculation has been upended. For Iran's IRGC Navy, which relies on asymmetric tactics, swarms of small, fast attack boats, anti-ship missiles hidden in coastal batteries, and mines, the Chinese fleet provides an invaluable shield to operate behind. For the U.S. Navy, the question becomes, how do you project power when a nuclear-armed rival has physically positioned itself as a human shield for your adversaries? And Washington's response is already in motion. We have confirmation that the USS Gerald R. Ford carrier strike group, last reported in the eastern Mediterranean, has canceled its scheduled port visit in Italy. It has been retasked. Naval intelligence and maritime trackers show it is now making maximum sustainable speed towards the Suez Canal. The most powerful warship ever built is en route to the Persian Gulf. The two most powerful navies on the planet, representing two rival superpowers, are now on a direct collision course in the world's most dangerous body of water. To understand the magnitude of Beijing's gambit, you must zoom out from the tactical chaos in the Strait of Hormuz and view the entire geopolitical chessboard. This is not an impulsive move. This is the culmination of a decades-long grand strategy. For years, analysts have spoken of China's string of pearls, a network of military and commercial facilities stretching from mainland China to the Horn of Africa. The goal: to secure the vital sea lanes that carry the lifeblood of the Chinese economy. Oil. Over 40% of China's imported oil, and nearly a fifth of the entire world's supply, passes through this single choke point. The U.S.-Iran conflict represents an existential threat to China's energy security. A full-scale war and a closure of the strait would cripple the Chinese economy in a matter of months. From Beijing's perspective, allowing the United States to hold the keys to their energy supply was an unacceptable strategic vulnerability. The Neutrality Patrol is their solution. This move is a direct, frontal assault on a cornerstone of American foreign policy that has stood for over 40 years, the Carter Doctrine. In 1980, President Jimmy Carter declared that the United States would use military force, if necessary, to defend its national interests in the Persian Gulf. Since then, the U.S. has been the undisputed military hegemon in the region. China has now called that bluff. They have placed their own military assets on the board and declared that America's exclusive security franchise is over. The Gulf is now a multipolar environment. This confrontation is also a clash of military technology. The incoming USS Ford represents the apex of American naval power, with its electromagnetic catapults and its air wing of fifth-generation F-35C Lightning II stealth fighters. But the Chinese CSG is not the Soviet Navy of the Cold War. The Type 055 destroyers are arguably the most heavily armed surface combatants in the world, and lurking in the background is the ultimate checkmate weapon: China's anti-ship ballistic missiles. Weapons like the DF-21D and DF-26, dubbed carrier killers, are specifically designed to neutralize the core of American power projection. By deploying their own carrier group into the Gulf, China is doing two things. First, they are demonstrating their own blue water naval capabilities. Second, they are creating a complex targeting problem. A U.S. strike on the Chinese fleet could be met with a devastating ballistic missile counterstrike on U.S. assets in the region, including the fort itself. Imagine the psychological pressure. The American admiral commanding the Ford Strike Group and the Chinese admiral commanding the Fujian Strike Group are now engaged in the most dangerous game of chicken in modern history. The rules of engagement are being rewritten by the minute. A radar lock interpreted as hostile intent, a warning shot that goes awry, a collision in the congested waterway. Any of these could be the spark. The fate of the global economy and the lives of thousands of sailors rest on their shoulders. But as the world focuses on the naval standoff, our intelligence partners have flagged a new, deeply concerning development. The gambit may not be limited to the sea. High-resolution satellite passes within the last 3 hours show a flurry of unusual activity at Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps missile batteries along the coast. And even more disturbing, transponder data from flight trackers shows at least 3 Chinese PLA Air Force Y-20 heavy transport aircraft have landed at Bandar Abbas International Airport, a dual-use civilian and military airfield, within the last 6 hours. Their transponders went dark upon landing. The Neutrality Patrol may have just grown a second front. The implications of Chinese military aircraft landing in Iran in the midst of this crisis cannot be overstated. What were in those Y-20s? The leading theory among intelligence analysts is the deployment of advanced Chinese air defense systems, most likely the HQ-9, a long-range surface-to-air missile system often compared to the Russian S-300 or the American Patriot. If true, this is a monumental escalation. China would be moving from a naval buffer to establishing a ground-based anti-access area denial, or A2AD, bubble on Iranian soil. An HQ-9 battery near the coast would create an integrated air defense network with the Chinese carrier strike group offshore. They could share targeting data, creating a multi-layered, redundant shield over the strait. This move would be aimed squarely at neutralizing American and Israeli air power, the primary tools for any potential strike against Iran. An F-35 or F-22 stealth fighter, designed to penetrate sophisticated air defenses, would now have to contend with not only Iranian systems, but also top-tier Chinese technology, potentially operated by Chinese crews. This completely alters the strategic calculus for every actor in the region, especially Israel. For years, Israel has maintained a policy of strategic ambiguity regarding potential military action to prevent a nuclear Iran. That option now becomes infinitely more dangerous. A strike on Iran would no longer be a strike on Iran alone. It would be a direct challenge to the military assets and personnel of the People's Republic of China. The risk of a regional conflict spiraling into a global superpower war has just increased tenfold. Behind the scenes, diplomatic channels are in meltdown. Washington is demanding answers from Beijing through back channels, but is being met with deflective rhetoric about de-escalation. This entire operation, the naval deployment, the perfectly timed declaration, the potential ground component, smacks of meticulous, long-term planning. This was not an opportunistic reaction to the latest flare-up. This was a premeditated move, waiting for the right moment of crisis to be executed. Beijing used the U.S.-Iran tension as the perfect cover to execute a strategic masterstroke. What we are witnessing is the end of an era. For decades, the world order was defined by American hegemony, enforced by its unparalleled naval power. Today, in the narrow waters of the Strait of Hormuz, that unipolar moment has been decisively challenged. China has transitioned from an economic competitor to a global military power broker, one willing and able to project force into a region the U.S. considered its own backyard. The U.S.-Iran conflict is no longer the main event. It is now a single theater in a much larger, much more dangerous great power competition. The front line of this new Cold War is not in the Taiwan Strait or the South China Sea. It is here, now, in the Persian Gulf. This is Breaking the Front. Stay informed, stay safe, and never forget the stakes. Subscribe for continuous, around-the-clock updates as this crisis develops. Beijing has called its move a neutrality patrol. But by inserting its military between two adversaries, is China an arbiter of peace, or has it just painted a target on its own back, becoming the inevitable first casualty in a wider war? What is the next move on this global chessboard? Let us know your analysis in the comments